And we're live, right?
Hey,
Yes. Hello, folks. How's it going? Corey, how are you?
I'm doing just peachy keen.
Good,
I'm
good.
I'm I'm thrilled to be here for another extremely important discussion
Yes.
on the Digipod Pokécast show that we host
Yeah,
together. Isn't
our
that great?
show.
I like that we do this.
I
This is
do
fun.
too. It's been a blast, and I'm glad
Yeah,
you and I, as well as viewers, can come together
yes,
about Pokemon Digimon.
yes. And I'll go one further. I think that all podcasts should begin their episodes by just stating, I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good. All right, now to the show. I
Yes.
think
Yes.
every single show should do that.
They
Just
should.
to
I know
confirm,
some that do, and it
we all
works.
still want to do this, right?
Yeah. Also, for those of you who observe, Happy Summerween. That's today.
Oh, I didn't realize that had an official start, but does it also have an official end?
I think
The
it's just
summer
the
ween.
day.
Oh, it's
Since
just a day.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
unlike Halloween, which actually has cultural background,
Huh.
Summerween is just for fun.
Kind of
Just
sounds like it's just going to a Ween concert in summer, which I'm doing. I'm
ooh,
going to a summer Ween. How about that?
there you go. Also relevant to current times, as in now, defined by the space-time calendar. There was some Pokemon news just yesterday because we got a Nintendo Direct. And that Nintendo Direct showed us a few clips from the new Scarlet and Violet DLC. And no Pokemon were really seen in there. Like it showed some clips of the new Pokemon we already knew about, but we got to see their 3D models and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, okay. But the exciting part was we got to see some characters.
Ah, some
Yes,
people, some
some
human people.
humans.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? Digimon and Pokemon both have humans in their franchises, like a
Yeah,
lot.
for better and worse.
Yes, and I think I'm pretty good at deciding if one franchise kind of does something. I don't want to say better, but in a way that appeals more to the masses,
Yeah.
or uses certain just kind of pre-established things to make for a solid design or whatnot. And I
Mhm.
think Pokemon might beat Digimon on this one.
100%. 100%. It has better human characters. Digimon has some standouts for sure,
Yeah.
but I think for the most part, they tend to really phone in the characters and like just specifically the writing of the characters for human characters. Um, and we'll get into all of that in this episode because Milk had the brilliant idea to talk about these humans in both of these franchises because we really haven't touched on that through
No.
the course of our show so far. Because why should we? There,
Exactly.
it's not the people cast show, person cast maybe, um, but
We're enough human for
yeah,
you.
yeah, exactly. But I think that at their best, both franchises um, are are when they're able to interact those two together. Like when you can have beautiful stories that are not one-sided, where it's like, okay, this is just a people story and it doesn't even matter that there are monsters there. No, you need the monsters.
Yes.
That's why we watch the show. Give me both.
Gotta have them
Make
all.
them work together. Um, and there are some truly emotional, like profoundly, heavy moments that I think both of these franchises have given us. But I will maybe go as far to say few and far between for both of them. As
Yeah.
far as that the weight of what a human character can bring to the table, um, I think that for the most part, the human characters are kind of there as a vehicle for the monsters, and they're a proxy for us. Obviously,
Exactly.
they're supposed to be like what we're relating to, which I obviously we'll get into this, but that is where I feel like Digimon is pretty strong, at least in that first series, because you really got to be their proxy of like, what is this new world?
Yeah.
This is insane. This is wild. Whereas with Pokemon, it was very grounded there.
Ash
But
knew
again,
what he
like
was in. Yeah.
knew what he was getting to. And I'll even walk back what I was just saying there because now that I'm talking it out loud, I think that that's also a strength that Pokemon has
Oh,
because we all wanted to be Ash. Like we wanted that adventure, that
yeah.
safe adventure. That's that's the big difference. Is like that's safe and like it's more appealing in some way because you
Well,
don't actually want to be stranded in the digital world. It's a horrible nightmare.
true. I will say they both lended to their marketing very well now that I think about it, because as a Pokemon fan, as a kid, you knew all 151 Pokemon. And in the show, Ash knew most of them, but like might need refreshers, so that felt familiar. But
Yeah.
as a kid that was into Digimon, you didn't know every single Digimon because there
Yeah.
was no Digidex. Like, you
Mhm.
got little pamphlets that showed some of them when you got toys and stuff, but you never knew all the Digimon. Digimon
Yeah.
doesn't have waves that you keep up
Mhm.
with. They're just
Exactly.
existing and bleeding in,
Yeah.
and that was real
Yeah.
for the kids too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will agree. The proxy for Digimon's first season was really good, and then I think after that, Digimon characters got very to themselves. They
Teen
were the
drama.
own character, yeah, and
Yeah.
in a way that did some good stuff. It lets you tell a story about those characters in a way Pokemon didn't have. But Pokemon's strengths are never its show. It's always its games. And
Hmm.
what I like about characters in the games are your the character you play is nobody. Like
Yeah.
there's barely any story
Void of
attached
any
to him.
personality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
The closest was in the third generation. You're in the back of a moving truck because your parents are fairly negligent, and you show up at your new house, and your dad's not even there because he's a busy gym leader, and that doesn't even play too heavy into the story. So it's fairly blank slate. But what I like about Pokemon is that the other kids are there and sometimes are interesting, but there's a lot of adults that are interesting too. So, as a kid, you can kind of like you feel very close to like where you are in real life, of like there are some cool adults, some dumbass adults, and then there's other kids. That whole like dichotomy is there, and then playing as an adult, you're like, oh, these kids act like kids, and then you can also kind of see these adults have more clear adult motives that you can kind of like understand better than when you could as a child.
Yeah. What I propose, and feel free to have another suggestion here for format for tonight's episode, but I was thinking we could basically um, bounce back and forth between franchises, going by maybe series or games, and basically just given a how do we feel about this fella? Just like, did you like him? Did you hate him? Was there a standout moment? That kind of thing. Does that seem like a decent way to just carry a conversation? And obviously, we don't have to hit every single
Yeah.
human character.
Well,
No,
there's
but
so many in
so
both.
many.
But yeah, I like that. And then also, I'm sure we'll touch on like tropes and who fills those and whatnot.
No.
So, did you want to kick it off? Because I know someone I want to ask you about.
Let's do that. If you have something you want to ask about,
Okay.
let's jump in from there, and then we'll follow as it may.
My dear friend, Mr. Behringer, how do you feel about Ty and the sequential Ty clones afterwards?
Yeah. So don't like any clone. Pretty much.
Okay.
I like that. That was a detractor for me with
Because they're
Digimon in
clones?
general. I'm sorry.
Because of the clone aspect?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Just as far as like, okay, you're gonna have another protagonist of basically the same exact archetype
Yeah.
every time, and he's gonna have a fire type Digimon every time. Like it was just like that kind of stuff bothered me because I think Ty is a great character,
Yeah.
mostly because he has Matt.
Yes.
Ty would be a shitty character if there wasn't Matt, and vice versa. I would hate Matt alone in a show. They need each other. But yeah, no, I think he's a great character though, and I love where they take both of those characters together into their teens, in like the later parts of the story. He's also silly. I mean, there's like a silliness to Well, especially with Digimon Adventure 1, because it's a very silly series, so
Yeah.
it's full of very dumb jokes and stuff
And
like
he's
that.
not the
So
brightest, and that leads to
no,
some
he's a
things.
jock.
Yeah.
He is a jock. He like we tend to forget that because it's like a nerdy show and
Yeah.
he's wearing goggles for no reason. But Ty is a jock,
Little
like
soccer
through and
jock,
through.
yeah.
He's a soccer jock. And like that all feeds into the um his perspective of default leader,
Yeah.
of like he just assumed that's how it was going to be. And I always thought that was an interesting dynamic to have, um essentially two leaders constantly going head to head,
Because Matt
because they
should be the
yeah,
leader.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But he could also kind of be a dick, so
Mm-hmm.
it's tough. And he would, I think he might think that, and this is really getting in the weeds here of what we think these imaginary characters' motivations are, but I'm sure he would be quick to say that Ty, thinks too irrationally or with emotion. He's not being logical. But Matt is full of that too. Like
Yeah.
he's absolutely, well, because he's an angsty kid who's going through a really hard time,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's going to feed into what he thinks is just a cold logic and just sturdy leadership. But no, he's absolutely susceptible to that too.
You can tell Ty kind of enjoys the situation in some aspects at some of the times, to where it's like
Yeah,
Matt is just kind of using it all as a distraction from his little brother, when she
yeah,
hates,
yeah,
as brothers do, and then also his home life of a divorce.
yeah,
And yeah, seeing that like constant conflict of like, and in ways, it's like, yeah, Matt should be the leader, but like Ty's courage and heart makes him a good leader too. But yeah, that double captain and not agreed upon and conflict was so good. But then also you have like Matt's character is also related to his brother TK. And so it's not just like two people at the forefront and then the rest of the characters don't matter,
yeah.
because you've got these siblings and you got the other characters. I feel like in the second season of Digimon Adventure, when they introduced Davis as the new Ty, you're like, okay, what's the point? And then later he kind of got his balancing out with what's his name,
Well,
Ken.
let's find out. Oh, Ken.
Yeah, so Ken and
Yeah.
Davis balanced each other out, but like it was just about the two of them, really, which was so
Mm-hmm.
weird, because this season had the fusion stuff, which was very much like, oh, these characters like matter to each other, and they did nothing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, jumping now over to Ken here. And maybe that'll be a good button that we can then jump back over to Pokemon, because I don't want to stay on Digimon this whole
Well,
time.
I know a good way to get to Pokemon from Ken, so
Okay,
yeah.
perfect, because I did definitely want to talk about Ken. Um, I haven't seen Adventure 2 pretty much since it was airing.
Okay.
I really didn't go back to that one at all, but I was watching those as they were coming out because I was still perfectly in the age group for it. So it was like it was fun. Even though as I was watching it, there was a lot I didn't care for in it.
Yeah.
But by this point, by the time like Adventure 2 rolled around, I was all in, baby. I was all Digimon. I pretty much left my Pokemon days behind me. I mean, I would still play like Blue version,
Yeah.
but I wasn't watching it at all. And I remember being very compelled by the Ken storyline, because that was dark. Like the whole stuff with is it Wormmon?
Yeah.
I feel like that's too simple, but it is Wormmon.
It
right?
is Wormmon.
Yeah, that entire storyline where when Ken is the villain, and like he abuses Wormmon, out of like neglect kind of abuse, but like
Yeah.
still abuse. Like he's not a good partner, but it's because of all of the shit that he's going through. It's just like, I thought that was a heavy thing to lay on a kid's show. I really do, like that, the entire plot with Ken, and like knowing that he was a Digidestin too, and like just the heaviness there.
It was surprising that like he turned around too. Like,
Mhm.
as an adult, I think I'd see it coming, of course. especially knowing how animation works. But like,
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, like this kid's getting a redemption arc. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, me neither. And probably because of our age at the time, but like I was all into it because I was just absorbing the story as it was happening.
Yeah.
Um, and then when that happens, oh, okay, this is a little heavier.
I can't
how
think of.
how I'm very curious how you're going to bring that to Pokemon.
Okay, so in Pokemon, we once did get something similar. So in every Pokemon game, you have a rival, and in the first game, it's the grandson of Professor Oak. His name canonically is Gary, but you can name him Assface or whatever you want.
As we all did.
Yeah. And he's a little bit of a jerk, and he kind of like learns a little bit towards the end. And in the different like alternate universes of different like the show or different versions of the games, like the newest version of the original games, which is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, he's different. A various level of like jerk to friend, but he's not that interesting. But in the next game, we had Silver. And Silver was cool because Silver was also like later on, I think you find out that he is the son of Giovanni, if I remember correctly. But also,
who's the mob guy, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that Giovanni?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I didn't misremember that. He had a Persian,
Persian,
is that
yeah.
what it's called?
And he was like the lead antagonist of the first two games.
Yeah.
And so Silver just goes in and steals a starter Pokemon after you. And you're like, what a jerk. And he is like a huge asshole to his Pokemon too and stuff. And I like that he was a little bit separated from the story compared to like Gary Oak. I don't know. There's just this more like charm about him and you wanting to like him, but him also being a huge like just jerk. And he finally redeems himself towards the end. And I recently watched a video of like a way that they could have really improved the storytelling with it, but the character himself was kind of cool. But the problem is while everyone loved that, they have done away with the like nasty rival for the most part. Yeah, in Gen 3 you have two kind of rivals, and the more interesting one is this like sickly kid that ends up becoming like pretty powerful with what the Pokemon he has. And then in Gen 4, I can't even remember your rivals in Gen 4, and I just played the remakes not too long ago. I think you have like a friend that's with you when you find your first Pokemon, and then that's it. You have this really annoying friend, and then there's also a lab assistant, and they're whatever. And then Gen 5, again, just like two kids annoying. Gen 6 got even worse with like a trio of kids you didn't care about.
You were telling me about that one. I remember that seems very unappealing. I find it odd that they wouldn't just keep the rival format, because it doesn't just work. Like, it worked well.
Yes.
Because in any kind of I'm sure there's a specific term for this kind of game, but like where it's essentially like a self improvement game along, like where you could just play it in a vacuum by yourself where you're just training and stuff. So it's good to have a character that serves as a rival.
Yeah.
Because you want something to compare your progress with.
And
because that's kind of what the rival character is for, right? Because
exactly.
Ideally, anytime that you cross their path throughout the game, you should be kind of at their level, right?
Exactly.
And they're almost like a marker of your progress. So if you do away with that, you're losing that marker.
Yeah, when it's just like a friend like wanting to test your strength, you don't feel like there's repercussions to losing and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've gotten a little bit better with how they've done it now. I will say in Generation 8, I liked how they did it. They had one just friend that you really couldn't care less about, who was pretty weak, wanted to be like his brother, who is the strongest in the world. So weak that by the end of the game, he actually changes his mind and has a different dream, which I will say is kind of cool. Like, in the sense that, like, as a young kid, everyone wants to be the top trainer, but after actually adventuring, he doesn't give up because he's weak. It's more like, now that I actually have seen the world and like have been out of my mom's house, I think this is the route I want to go. Which I don't know. I think is a cool
I like
lesson for
that.
kids. Yeah,
Absolutely. Because I will like defend anyone changing their mind for
yeah,
one thing. Like we should encourage that because new information is valid. Like take in that new information and make your decisions from it. But that's like a good value to instill. Like if it's
yeah,
also just a little more interesting. Um, no, but I had another thought there about that is the opposite of that. I really wouldn't like any kind of story that just really drives home how important it is to stick to your goals no matter what. That's a goal that you made. You have to finish. No, you
yeah.
don't. You don't have to. Like
I don't
you
think that's
can
ever
you
in
can
the Pokemon series
good.
either.
Good.
Um,
Because, but I mean, it is kind of a common value, at least like in American literature and stuff, of just
yeah,
the stick-to-itiveness of the American can-do attitude. So it's just nice to not see that in something.
yeah, and I will say some Japanese media carries it too, not because of the same attitude, but because of the like staying diligent to something, which is like
Yeah,
to prime kids to go into office work, but it
yeah,
carries over morally similar to the American side. But yeah, it's nice to not see that. But Gen 8 also had another character, Bede, who I really liked because he was this kind of punk ass who like worked for the big shot and then like did something like really shady, and you're like, yo, whoa, you can't do that.
yeah.
And he's like, I don't care. And he kept being a jerk for a bit, and then he runs into this like old woman who's a gym leader, and she's obsessed with pink, and he's got a little pink stuff going on. And she's like, "You're my new protege because you look like an old woman and you're dressed in pink." She doesn't say that, but if you look at this like other
Yeah.
14-year-old boy, he looks like an old woman. Um, and like it's so cool to see him finally get like some type of parent that like scolds him because he's still kind of like an ass, but a little bit fun loving and like recognizes that he's your friend. And like that you make each other stronger. And it's like, yes, that's great. Like if you don't want an asshole side by side constantly to be the rival, give us one character that's like
Yeah.
that with redemption. And
Yeah.
yeah, they're starting to do that, and I love it.
What was the redemption that you were first talking about? Because you said that there was a really good redemption arc, that you saw some sort of thing where they could have made it better, but it was still good. I'm intrigued what that redemption arc was.
So that was for Silver, and what I saw that someone could have made better was not so much like the story itself, but the storytelling. So like in this game, Silver steals one of the starter Pokemon and then gets a little bit of a team. And the video I saw, they recommended one of his early Pokemon he gets in his team is a Lavatar, which a Lavatar is a small little dinosaur that turns into Godzilla. It's a repeating type of Pokemon called a pseudo legendary. Very strong, 3 steps, starts off weak. And so they recommended that as being like, that's the first Pokemon he catches, and you see it grow with him. And then by the last fight, they suggested you start to see him kind of realize the errors of his ways in the second to last fight, and then the time you meet him for the last fight, he already has redeemed, changed his mind. He's like, you know what? Now I realize, like, it's better to be friends with your Pokemon. It's better to like be a group together and all together achieve your dreams rather than just be in charge of them and try to use their power. And they added dialogue where his Pokemon finally evolved into Tyranitar, the big strong version of that. So that's his ace. So you got to see this one that like wasn't just a stolen one, but his first real one. And then through friendship, which it's not a friendship evolution, but it kind of works, evolved. And then you fight him, and he's not an asshole. You're fighting him just for the sake of like you're rivals. You're both trying to improve. Yeah. And he's got one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. And I was like, yeah, that would have been a lot better.
What did occur? Because I like everything you just said there, but what actually happened in the game?
So what actually happened was his team kind of was insignificant. He did have the starter that he stole, but he also had a Crobat, which is a Pokemon that only evolves via friendship, but it kind of evolved off screen. So you see him and he has this Crobat. So you know at least he's not being a total like jerk to his Pokemon. He's not like just abusing them anymore. But there's nothing in the story that really says that. Which, like, sure, environmental storytelling is one thing, but it just, for a character that the story's not about, that you don't see the whole time, but it's just kind of sprinkled through, it doesn't feel like enough, you know, especially for a
Yeah.
kid's game. I'll say, as much
Yeah.
as I respect kids' intelligence, environmental storytelling is a different place than this. Like, I think him, you know, just like showing that he earned that through friendship would have been better. And then also he doesn't like change his ways until right after you beat him. So it's kind of like, well, I kicked the shit out of you. I guess now you're going to be good. Like
Yeah.
the idea of him like redeeming himself on his own, but also because he's been going against you constantly and seeing how you go through it, I think was cool. A cool idea. And the video I saw really didn't change much of the writing. They just kind of changed the pacing a little bit and then also added that evolution thing. It made a world of difference. But, you know, that was like Gen 2. That was like almost 25 years ago, 23 years ago. We're getting a lot more and better characters in Pokemon. A lot of like, some redeem, some don't. Some grow, some just kind of stay where they are at. You know, when a new game comes out, we're like, who's the bad guy, and like, how bad are they really? You know, in one of the games, the bad team were just overzealous fans of a girl who like just didn't really care. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. Like they're just so rowdy cheering for her that it causes a little bit of a ruckus. Um, you know, at some points they were annoying, but like it's a kid's property. Sometimes that's going to be the case, but at least it's a different
Absolutely.
idea.
Yeah.
Any Digimon characters that kind of like had an interesting idea of a trope or like who they were?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as human characters, you know, this not technically a human character, but I think it's worth mentioning because I found it unique as a kid anyway. But just the character of Jedi,
Oh
like
yes,
he's essentially like a digital spirit, sort of. I mean, I'm sure there's deeper information as far as what exactly he is because I know um, they did a lot with him later. Like
yeah, they've
they went
reused
some
them.
places with him. Uh-huh. But when like my warm and fuzzy memories of that character are in his first appearances where he's just this mysterious um I mean a spirit that basically shows up
Yeah,
and helps like guide the Digidestin in that first arc. And I just thought that was a great character in general to see something that wasn't clearly coded as just a monster,
yeah.
you know. We knew he wasn't one of us, but but there was something a little different. Is there any kind of parallel to Pokemon? Like, is there a similar, like, as far as a mysterious guide? Like,
Mysterious guy.
because I know we have obviously Professor Oak, and like that's the obvious, you know, parallel. But is there something that's a more like we don't really know what to think about this thing. He just keeps popping up, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they've done some different mysterious characters in the sixth generation games. There's this guy named Oz. Let me see if I can find just anything on him. But he was like super tall and like seemingly immortal. And like you find out he was kind of like behind the ancient weapon that like destroyed parts of the world. Yeah, 3,000 years old. And you just kind of see him keep popping up, and then you learn his story, which was like kind of sad. He got separated from his partner Pokemon. And then here, 3,000 ish years later, he gets reunited and he's crying. And it's like this giant tall man holding this like little flower Pokemon crying. So
Oh wow.
it's interesting to see him go from like someone you weren't even sure if he was like good or bad to like a cool dude, and then like seeing him kind of like get reunited, and it was pretty emotional for that. Um, so yeah, Pokemon does a fairly okay job at like inserting some people you're kind of like, oh, like what are they like? Although
Mhm.
for the most part, you probably know if they're like mysterious good or mysterious bad. Um, in the new Arceus game, Pokemon Legends Arceus, which this is kind of spoiler and it's fairly new, so keep that in mind. There's
I
this,
don't know when I'll ever play it again because
yeah,
I bought it and I played it for like a month and I was like, I just don't know if I could do this.
yeah. Well, this is like post game too. Like you have to beat the game and go like
Okay.
super far to get this. I haven't even done. I've just like read about it, but there's this shopkeep and he's kind of mysterious. You're like, why are you showing up at these places and why do you know this stuff? Like you're just a traveling shopkeep. Um, and all of the Pokemon or all the human characters in that game are basically like they have different outfits compared to modern day Pokemon characters because they're like ancient
It's in the
relatives.
past. Yeah.
Yeah, and something about the Pokemon franchise is your hairstyle is passed down. It seems.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's a lot of people like, oh, they have that hair. They're a relative of this. Some are less on the nose, but there's this.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that was an aspect of that game. So there are literal like ancestor relatives to
Oh,
characters that
so
we
many.
know in. That's cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
That's neat.
And one of which was a relative of a character that came out in the game after it, and so that was like a cool tie-in. Like we got to
Yeah.
see that first. Um, which also, just since that's the theme of today's show, that I thought was super cool. Getting to see these like characters, they weren't too much similar, but you could tell who they're related to, and I don't know, it was fun because
Yeah.
it just
I
got
love
a
that
new
shit.
version.
Like I'm all about that kind of thing. That's
Yeah.
fun.
And so one of them was the like great grandmother of Cynthia, who's like a big, strong, badass champion of a region. And you saw her, and you're like, oh, cool. But then you like look at this one guy, and he also seems to be a relative, and you're like, what's up with that? And then like later on, you find out he's like obsessed with Arceus and he has his hair done like Arceus. And he turns out to be kind of a bad guy, and he has the Pokemon that's kind of the equivalent to Satan, Garatina. Did you not know there was a Satan Pokemon?
I didn't, and I'm looking it up. Keep talking. I am listening, but I
Yeah, I again, I haven't gotten there myself, so I don't know 100% of the details. But it's Volo. If you like play through the game and follow through him, there's some pretty interesting stuff. Or I don't know, watch a YouTuber that explains it all. Um, but yeah, the newest game, it was really cool because all of the bad guys who were bullies turned out to not be bullies. They were a group that stopped a bully, but in a way that could get them in trouble. So they just started being, I don't remember the big fancy word for kids that don't go to school.
oh, like truants.
Yes, yeah, and they just ditch school and start Team Star, um, and yeah, they're great. Oh, another interesting character from the newest game,
Yeah.
which I don't think would be interesting at first, but somehow they pulled it off, is Larry. Which is just a like an office worker, but he's really good at Pokemon battling. So he's a gym leader, and then later on he turns out to be an Elite Four member, but with like a different team. And he's like, yeah, they told me I had to do this. Like he's not even that into Pokemon battling. He's just really good.
I love that. I love that so much.
It's a rare instance where like a character isn't enjoying their life, but it's still charming and a fun character that you enjoy. You know, there's pity there too, but yeah, I really
I
like
just love
Larry.
any reluctant master of something.
Oh,
Like
that
if
is a
you're
good
really
trope.
good at something and you're just like, I do it, I guess. That's funny to me. That's comedy gold.
Yeah, yeah, and something that
Especially
could,
Pokemon.
yeah, and it's something
Of all
that could
things.
be so easily overplayed in Pokemon, and it's not. They've reserved it for this one guy, and they did a great
Yeah.
job. And like, Pokemon has a really bad time with like not mixing the game mechanics with story elements, like the other character I told you about. They could have done things to do more storytelling, but with him having a different team, like that does help the storytelling of him just being so good and just not into it.
I love that. How is Giratina like Satan?
Okay.
I have it up here. I know he's from like the distortion world, which I'm assuming is like a parallel universe.
Yeah,
Right?
so Arceus is the creator of the universe, and then Arceus had to create the trio of time, space, and then like distortion essentially. And so Garatina's like the bad stepchild of the three. And he has two forms. You'll see one that's got legs, and then one that doesn't. And the one with legs is his like locked away form, and that's what you see usually. And then his released form, his true form, is the one with the spikes. And so a lot of people say it's kind of the equivalent to Satan because it's like the opposite of Arceus, who is like a god.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the ruler of the distortion world. And then some of the imagery of like the three spikes, or the three rows of spikes on the neck, and then three on the body and the wings. You know, that's kind of like the Christian sense of like Satan, the like underworld leader, and so people tied to that. Although, to be honest, Arceus has like very little like Catholicism or whatever. It's grounded in like if you look at the design inspirations of Arceus, it spans from like 5 different religions, including like a llama being a deity. It's super interesting. Just how they came up with it. But yeah, so Giratina is the opposite of that. And so while there's nothing like too explicitly like devil Satan as far as like Devilmon or Loosemon from Digimon, that's like the closest equivalent.
Got it.
But still a friend if you have one.
Okay, gotcha. He is. So maybe this is too big of a question, and this is off topic from humans, but I am genuinely curious about this. When it comes to these sort of more like, I guess, unique Pokemon, but like Pokemon that serve more as a character, are there multiple of them? Or is there one Giratina? Like that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, is like, how come there are multiples of some Digimon, of some Pokemon, and then singles of some?
So you're mainly referring to mythic and legendary Pokemon.
Okay,
and
gotcha. So that's the dividing factor. Okay.
Yeah. And so something about Pokemon as a franchise is there's multiple like continuities. So even amongst the games, it seems as though there's actually like 2 timelines, even though they don't really get into it, and it's very like in the background. So that's important to keep in mind. And then this show's going to be its own thing. But typically there's only one of a lot of the legendaries. Things like Lugia, that's a legendary, and then we've seen it with a little baby Lugia. So there's more than one of that. And then you've got things like Deoxys, which is like this DNA alien, and so like theoretically there could be more than one. But then you have Mewtwo, who's like there should only be one, because it was cloned, made in a lab. But there's a different Mewtwo in one of the movies, and it's like, well, is that a different Mewtwo, or is this just a different continuity? And that's like the original Mewtwo, but's been hidden. So it gets a little funky, but yeah, mostly the deity ones like Arceus, Giratina, Palkia, Dialga, there should only be one. And then others, it might just be there's only one now, but used to be more, or they're just the other ones are really hidden.
Got it. So in the games, do they maintain the single aspect?
Yes, like, the games are very much only one.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can't think of in the games anytime there's duplicates of a legendary.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
These are the questions I have for someone who does not actually play these games.
Yeah. And like Pokemon, it's weird. Like ecologically, they really try to play by their rules, but canon-wise, they don't. They just.
And you know what? I like that. I like how there's just this understanding of just like, don't think about it too much. just enjoy it.
I
like
like
that.
thinking too
And
much
I
about
think
it.
that I also like thinking a lot about these things, but I like when any sort of franchise or thing like that, if it gives you enough material to have the kind of conversations we've been having about these shows,
Yeah,
but at the same time to not require those conversations to be had. Does
true.
that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
I love that we could enjoy this show, either of these shows, and not have these conversations. Like, they're not required to understand them.
you
They're
can
just
jump
fun.
in anywhere, enjoy
You could
any
jump in
part.
anywhere. Exactly.
Um, and I will say the Pokemon games hold on to their own continuity in each game really strongly. So if you want it to make sense, you want it to be like there, you can just fully explore. Like each game doesn't have its things that go against each other. It's just like the
Yeah.
overarching thing. So yeah, you can kind of come to a conclusion, and you won't have the solid answer, but it'll be feasible in one in particular thing. So that's cool. Um, so both of our franchises are about a bunch of kids, and
Yes.
so they all involve parents. Should we get into the monster parents?
I mean, you will probably have more to talk about on the subject, being, I'm assuming, more familiar with some Pokemon parents, because there's very little to go off of as far as Digimon parents. Like, you only get small bits of them, and sometimes I I think I recall there being good dialogue that like made me chuckle. Like they didn't completely throw away those characters,
Yeah,
but they weren't really a focus. Well, I will also say, as far as Digimon adults, so not talking about the kids here, but
yeah,
Digimon adults,
adults.
I think that they're really good in general, just throughout most series that I've seen and in the movies. They are pretty solid with like throwaway gags that they'll give um essentially extras in the
Yeah,
background adult characters to have. I like those moments. Like, there's one, I think it's in the Digimon movie actually. Um it's like two guys in a truck, and one of them was like, well, I forget the exact line, but he's like, did you see that? No, I was sleeping. And it's
yeah,
like, what do you mean you're driving?
yeah.
Like, those are good lines. I like that.
Which
And you couldn't give that line to the kids to do. It wouldn't have worked at all. Like,
yeah,
even a version that would have made sense if they were like driving a go-kart or something, it wouldn't have worked. That needed to be a workplace joke.
yeah, and a throwaway character because the implications of the irresponsibility cannot be dived
Yes.
into. I will say Ty's mom.
Nope, exactly. We're moving on.
Well, Ty's mom,
Mm.
with the awful recipes she makes, that was a good gag. I think that's mostly in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do pass
Yeah.
the role of parent onto other people, I think, like in Digimon, because if your parents know, they're going to be too worried. But if this parent, like government figure, knows, they're worried, but they also kind of don't give a shit about you because there's more at stake. If the digital world like bleeds in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I will say,
Mhm.
in the series that like did give figures like that, I did like that. Like Jedi was one. How can you not touch that Jedi looks like Anakin? Like he had the like side
Yep.
ponytail thing. But yeah, they had some of those like government agents that were like on the kid's side, but for some reason couldn't be super helpful.
Yeah. Fuck it. We don't have Digimon. We can't do anything.
Yeah, Digimon's such a harder story to write adults for that like are actually involved, because I mean, think about it. Like, why the stakes are so high? Why leave it in the hands of children? If not, children are the
Yeah.
only ones who can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, like it's an interesting almost clarity that the adults would have had, which is, we literally can't force these kids to do what we tell them to do, because then their Digimon won't do what they need to do. So we have to work with them instead. Like, their hand is completely forced. Like,
yeah,
they're not a good governing body that's just understanding the situation and like, oh, this needs that. No, they have to do it this
They
way
have to
because
abide.
that's the only way it can work.
Which some could say is a metaphor for the future generation and how we need to abide to the world that they're creating for themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's also true.
Yeah, the real Digidestins are the Gen Z. uh, yeah, well, as far as Pokemon goes, the parents are just supportive and cool. It's not hard to write a parent in Pokemon like it is for Digimon, but they can't do cool things with them typically. I feel. And some of the like relationship dynamics are weird, like how Ash's mom wants to be more involved in her son's life but just like can't be because he's like a little prick running around. And it's like there's so much
Yeah.
technology. But I guess it would be entertaining if his mom's always bugging him. Oh,
Hmm.
in the games, okay, so I think it was in the second generation games, or third, your mom could have access to your bank account and she just randomly buy you stuff with your money, which like I think she got them at discounted rates, but it's still like,
Okay.
hey, I
Still,
needed that. I
yeah,
didn't need more Pokeballs. I needed potions, and you just spent my money.
that's an interesting aspect of that game. Like,
Yeah,
I guess it's posed as a challenge. It's like, but it's a challenge that also helps. It's weird.
yeah.
That's a weird dynamic.
See, I don't think they thought about it too much. I don't think they were like, oh, here's a challenging aspect that pulls from your funds, but also gives you some of the resources you'll eventually need. At Lorca. I think they're just like, wouldn't it be fun if some of your money went missing?
It is kind of funny because I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's always like a small amount. It never
Yeah.
cleans you out or anything,
Yeah.
right?
It's
So I'm sure their thinking is like, this is never going to affect you drastically.
yeah, yeah. So it just read as a fun thing, and like the personality was there of like, oh, honey, I went and bought you this, and just like it kind of had that like, mom, I don't need that. But
Yeah,
it's an item in the
that's all.
game, so you will use it at some
Yeah,
point. But
yeah.
um, yeah, I will say the non-parent adults have been interesting in Pokemon though. Like the professor from this last game that like went around pretending to be a kid through one of the storylines, or last
Oh, that's
week.
fantastic. We have 10 minutes and we didn't
Oh
even
God.
talk about Team Rocket. Team
Oh,
Rocket.
I
I
think
want to hear
antagonists have to
your
be their
hot
own
takes.
thing. But
Yes.
I,
But exactly that. I think that should we figured out what the next episode is.
yeah,
We'll talk about Team Rocket as well as any recurring villain organization
yeah,
of Digimon. But really, it's going to be the Team Rocket episode because there's so much I'm sure we can talk because I know very little beyond first gen and like what I was shown through the show and the first game. So what's your like right out the gate like your general not your take on Team Rocket but like some of your favorite takeaways of Team Rocket.
Team Rocket is cool because they are just straight up villains. To whereas every other bad guy in Pokemon has a motivation where you're like, oh yeah, I get it. And Team Rocket is just like assholes. They're just in it for the money.
Yeah,
And as long as that's not overdone, that's actually interesting. And because
yeah,
they're not
it's a
throughout the
good motivation
yeah,
as a villain.
yeah, Team Rocket's not throughout the whole series. The show always has like the trio Team Rocket, but the games don't have Team Rocket a whole lot, and so they didn't overdo it. But they have done it more than once, and it's cool and interesting. And yeah, not my favorite bad guys, but I like them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the comedy trio of Jesse and James
They are great.
and Meowth. Like that's a good comedy trio. Like
I
I just remember that fondly.
I really like how they had that trio that were really like comic relief, and then they were backed by something bigger and more serious. Because it's like
Mhm.
believable that they had the funds to do these things, being as like
Yeah.
unsuccessful as they are,
Yeah.
in a good way. Um, but yeah, should we get to our end segment then?
Yes. Milk, Tell me about a Digimon you like.
Okay. So I was going through Digimon and I saw a few, and then I stumbled upon G-Cutemon. Uh, so
G-Humon? How do you spell that?
cute, like Cute.
Oh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
Cutemon, I don't know much about this dude.
Oh yeah, yeah, I
Um,
remember that. Yeah.
looks like it was in some anime series, basically just a bunny with headphones. But G-Cutemon, they really fucked his shit up. This bunny in
Oh, this is
headphones
the
gets,
fucked up little guy you were talking
yeah,
about.
he gets knight armor, which on his back it looks like he has a sword as well as a rocket launcher, maybe. And then he has right shoulder pauldrons, right?
Let's see. I'm finding it right
Yeah,
now because I just have Cutemon up, so I'm trying to find the
G hyphen Cutemon.
G hyphen. Okay, because
Uh,
I don't think I had the hyphen.
there's not much info on this little dude. Doesn't it looks like he only showed up in Digimon X-Roar Wars, something I've
Oh
never
yeah,
seen.
yeah. I didn't watch any of those. This guy is a hoot. What
Yeah,
is going on there with him?
he's got
Yeah, he's got these shoulder pads that appear to have like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle,
yes,
and then his lower section appears to be like a large conga. Like it looks like a drum, like a war
yeah.
drum, actually, and that's clearly what it is because he's holding mallets. So
Hmm.
this guy beats on his dick
He's a
as
eunuch and
as
so mad about it.
just boom 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 boom. Just that's what he does. I love that. That is cool, and he's got dinosaur legs.
Yes, just be all Digimon rule of throw some dino parts on it, and it's a
Yeah,
Digimon. What I really
really.
like,
All he's missing is like any torn or stitched skin. He's missing that as far as like, all right, we got to get every Digimon element in here.
you
He doesn't
say
have that,
that.
and he doesn't have any buckles.
Well, you say that, but he's got Gigi's club, Gigimon's club, which is like a paw on a stick, which has some tors,
Yeah,
and I think there's a belt holding that paw. You can't see it,
you're right.
but
I
I
think
think they
you're
got it.
probably right. Yeah,
Um,
they fucking did it.
I
They made the most Digimon.
I like to think they looked at this and then they're like, it's not done. Oh, we'll give him two monkey tails with rings, like your
And then
eyes
they
catch
never
up.
say another fucking word about him.
Yeah,
He's our dirty little secret.
yeah, like Chimeramon wasn't enough of a mixture of Digimon. They had to make one that just it's like the Digigod intended for him to look this fucked up, and so be it. All right, Corey, I believe you have a mysterious Pokemon that you like.
Yes, yes. I assume this must be some evolution of a Taurus, but I've never seen this before. Tell me about a Buffalant,
Oh, Bouffalant. Okay. Uh,
because this guy is cute as hell. I love his big hair. I like how you don't get to really see his eyes, at least in this sprite that I'm looking at.
yeah, they're
Yeah,
usually
he's
kind of
cool design.
hidden.
I like it.
I really
Yeah.
enjoy him. So Boufflant is was designed for an interesting purpose because Pokemon came out and then they had a second generation which added to it. Then they had a third generation which was like kind of new but had a little bit of the old. And then fourth finished up on all the old designs. And they're like, what do we do now? And they're like, complete reboot. So they made Generation 5, which the whole game only new Pokemon. And because of that, they kind of had to design copycats
Oh,
that mechanically or ecologically fit old Pokemon. And so they came out with this Buffaloont to replace Tauros. What I like
yeah. I
about
mean,
it,
it's yeah, yeah.
which, you know, the political correctness of these designs are questionable, but there is an eagle that has an American
Yeah.
headdress, and then this buffalo that kind of has like the fro, because this is a region based off New York, which is America for the sake of Pokemon. Um, but
Okay.
they're like it's basically people who went to America once to study for this game were like, how can we make American history into monsters? And The taste wasn't completely there, but the designs I think are fun and interesting if you don't think about them too much in ways. But it's got a lot more character than Tauros. You know, there's these like big horns and they have like the rings on them, and yeah, they're one of the first Pokemon you see in the new Pokemon Snap, and they're really cool because you're like going along, you're like, holy fuck, they're huge and they're taking naps.
That's
So
great. That was the next question, was like how big they were in relation to others. Because like I don't know if this is a teeny tiny little buffalo, but you're saying it's a really big
yeah,
Pokemon.
it's pretty big. I would say like you'd be head size to it standing next to one. Something about Pokemon
Okay.
is they never get too big. It's a weird thing. Like even the dinosaurs, there you're like, oh, that's got to be like double human size. They're usually your size or shorter. Um,
Yeah.
but this guy's got some heft. Honestly, one of my favorite designs out of that generation, though, just I think they did a great job of making an animal that's still an animal, but has some like personality to it that like it's just not a real life buffalo, and it's not even just the cartoon version of a buffalo. There's subtle little tweaked differences. But yeah, and
Yeah.
look,
I think it's far superior to Taurus, because I
yes,
always thought Taurus was an example of a few different Pokemon. I think in the first gen have this, where it's like, that's just a seal. That is an animal that already exists. You just
yeah.
gave it powers.
Well,
You
and
know?
three
And I felt
tails.
like Taurus, like that was just like, okay, that's a bull. You made a
Yeah.
bull.
What's so weird is in this newest game they made a new Taurus, like a regional variant, Paldean
Hmm.
Taurus, and it's just Taurus, but black fur and different tail combinations. Because regular
Hmm.
Taurus has three tails, these ones
Yep.
have like three big tails, three like propeller tails, or three like braided tails. Like nothing. And I it's like not an interesting design, but it's interesting that like even when modern Pokemon are all full of like tons of like design aspects to make them very interesting, they'll still go back to an old design, hardly touch anything, and make it new for the sake of like the different parts in the world they're making have like a different level of detail to design, so it doesn't feel like just the newest Pokemon live here, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
interesting, if not the most exciting. But yeah, your buffalo friend is definitely cool.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's another good one that we got in the can.
Yeah,
I hope that you folks had a good time listening to us gab away, and keep on poking in the free world.
yes,
Do you like that? Is that a
yeah.
good one?
That's it. I
Oh,
can't
that was
even
a good
add
one.
anything to that. That's perfect. See